Hi, and welcome to the Conscious Marketer podcast. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm Richard, and I'm also joined by Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hello.
And we've got a special treat for you today. We are going to be joined by Christine Volden. Hi, Christine. How you doing?
Hey, guys. Great to be here.
And I had the good fortune of working with Christine a few years back, and she has a company called Soulful Selling, and she's a sales and marketing evangelist. She's got over 15 years of experience in selling, managing sales teams, and has created programs that have reached over 500,000 people. So I think she's got some on LinkedIn. She helps small business owners and entrepreneurs build sales teams, and also teaches the quiet selling method. And she also has a few new things that she's going to maybe share today.
Yep.
And I can't just wait to just jump in and kind of get into this, because a lot of our people have a little fear of selling and fear of getting their work out. And then we have a percentage that are also introverts too. And if we want to get our work into the world and do positive things, we have to kind of figure out how to get past that. So maybe we could just start by, maybe you could share a little bit about the quiet selling method and what is it and how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. So many people need to get this information, because I hear this all the time about salespeople, or just people who are business owners, right? Who have this big fear around selling and a lot of shame too, which is really unfortunate, because there's nothing wrong with making money. And if you start your own business, right, you put so much into that. A lot of people I know have left big corporate jobs, right? And to do all of that work, right, and not be able to make is just like, I feel like that is one of my missions, is really to help people overcome that, because I hate to see that kind of thing happen. So the quiet selling method is really 3 parts, right? So one part I call nuts and bolts of sales, and that's, a lot of people have explained this, and this is typically what you see as sales training, right? It's like, hey, how does a sales funnel work? How do you follow up with people? How do you write your marketing copy? All that kind of stuff. And I always say sales, like in itself, is a numbers game. You could really sell anything. You could sell a lump of coal to anyone, and you could have terrible marketing and a terrible product. But if you talk to enough people, you will sell some, guaranteed. And a lot of people really overthink that, and they're like, oh, I'm doing this wrong, but it's really a numbers game. But with that being said, the second part is what I call the 5 phobias. Even though that's true, we hold ourselves back in so many ways. So I created these phobias. They're called the 5 phobias, and we can talk about them a little bit more. But they're kind of the mental blocks that hold us back from asking for what we want, right? And it could be something like, imposter syndrome. It could be something like taking on more responsibility, so we avoid doing our own work, right? There's a lot of stuff there. And then the third part is what I call creating soulful connection, because selling, and this is like more true now than ever, with the rise of technology after COVID, it's all about selling to people. Even if you're selling a technical product to another, it's still a person talking to another person. And with this whole rise of automation that I've seen, it's like, I don't know about you guys, I get like dozens of messages on email, LinkedIn, social media that are just these automated messages that might have my name in the top. But other than that, it's a completely automated message. And then I just get them again and again. It's like there's someone thinking like, if I send this message 3 times, maybe this person will answer. But it's very clear they know nothing about my business. I don't need a phone system or janitorial services for an office that I do not have. But yeah, I mean, I really think that personal connection is what's really, really important. I always say connect first, sell later. So that is the third part. So those are kind of the 3 main parts of the quiet selling method.
I'm super curious to hear more about these phobias, because I know a lot of our people are very afraid of sales.
Yes. So let me just go over them very, very briefly. And this is a big part of the work that I do now. So the 5 phobias are responsophobia, right? And that's kind of like, a lot of people would say that's being responsible for others instead of being responsible for yourself. Now, I also will say I suffer from all of these. So if you recognize, these in yourself and you're starting to feel bad, don't. Most people recognize with all of them. I certainly do. And they're based on my experience. My example of this is all you know, I'm a mom. I have two kind of young kids, 12 and 10, but I used to always volunteer for everything at their school so I could avoid doing my own work, right? I'd be like, I have to go chaperone for a field trip, so I'm not going to go do that email today, right? So it looked good on paper, right? I felt like, oh, well, I'm doing a good mom. Who could ever criticize me for that? But the reality is I wasn't being responsible for my own business. And that is, you know, a big thing. And there's a lot more examples, but that's kind of the common example that I use. The second one is faith phobia. And I always say that's the control freak. I kind of have like names for all of these, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And faith phobia, I think, is a big issue where I live in the Bay Area. And it's really not believing that there is, you know, a bigger picture or a bigger, you know, a higher power that can support you. So the way this shows up is you see like people who are just total workaholics who really believe, hey, if I do more, if I send more emails, if I do more posts on social media, I will be successful, right? Or it might be, hey, I need to hire more people or throw more money at the problem. Where really what I've noticed in my business over the last 10 years is the less I do that, like the more successful I am, right? So it's really just having faith in something bigger, and it could be just faith in yourself, right? It could be faith in your business. It could be, you know, how you refer to God. It could be any of those things. So that, and stop me if you have questions on any of these. The third one is fail phobia, right? This is the procrastinator. Typical, like for me, this is like, I feel like one of my superpowers is that I can procrastinate on anything. And it's really, yeah, like being scared to fail, right? And there's a lot of research about procrastination and being scared of, you know, failing or being scared of succeeding. So I talk about that a bit. Genius phobia is really the person who looks at what everybody else is doing. And I think I saw you guys talked about this on a previous podcast. But yeah, it's really looking at like, hey, what is so-and-so doing on their website, or how are they developing their programs, or what are they selling? Like, I'm going to do the same thing because I don't trust myself enough to develop my own message or my own programs, or, you know, whatever you're selling. So that's genius phobia. And the last one is exposure phobia. And that's really fear of being seen. And, you know, if you're putting yourself out there, and I see that is a really, really common thing that I hear from people who have a fear of selling. They're just scared to put themselves out there and like be exposed. So that's like the super quick, you know, definition of them all.
Yeah, those are all, I can see bits of where I've had to work through bits and pieces of all those.
Yep.
I think a lot of people have like a negative connotation on social media and some of the platforms that where you get out there. And I think it's a lot easier to kind of stay hidden, you know, and not, you know, it's a lot safer, but then if you have a bigger mission that you're meant to connect with, I'm kind of curious how you bring the soul into selling. Like how does that kind of play out practically? And
Great question. Yeah, I always say if like Brene Brown wrote, like, because a lot of people know who she is, like wrote a sales like manual, that would be Soulful Selling, right? So because I do believe that people need to understand that sales 101 part, right? The nuts and bolts of selling and how you call people and build a sales funnel. But I also integrate that. And the reason I teach that is, number one, a lot of people have not gotten that exposure, and they don't have realistic expectations. They think they can call 5 people and then, you know, they're going to build a business, when, like I said, you know, like a lot of it is a numbers game. But I really integrate that. So I explain to people, okay, here's the basics of selling. Now let's look at like diving into that and building your sales funnel and starting to reach out with, you know, to people with your message. And then there's a lot of like, oh, wait, I'm not comfortable doing that. Like I've never just explained that and had people be like, yeah, great, I got it. I'm going to go sell. I'm going to make $1 million. Like no one ever is like, yeah, okay, great. Because there's so much hesitation. Once you understand, well, here's how sales works, which is really simple. You literally just call a lot of people or email a lot of people, and you have an offer and you say, would you like to buy it? Right? Like that is the essence of selling. But for some reason, people feel uncomfortable. They feel they underprice, right? They feel uncomfortable asking. They don't know even what they want. Sometimes, a lot of times people don't even know what their offer is. And I will say, Richard, you were great at pointing this out when I worked with you. But sometimes, yeah, people don't even know what they're offering, or they think they want to sell something and do, and then they realize maybe they didn't really want that. So I help them work through the phobias. So I would say sometimes it's coaching. I spoke on stage at this conference in Las Vegas recently, and at the end we asked for questions, and people were like, I feel like this is like some kind of therapy. So I guess that's how I would describe it. It's like, I'm going to walk you through how sales works technically, and then we're going to talk about all of your inner fears and blocks and beliefs that prevent you from doing that.
So how did you discover all of this?
Great question. So I worked for 15 years in sales. I worked for a lot of big companies, Yahoo, AOL. My clients were like Google, Facebook. So I worked in tech, right? But I am also an introvert. And, you know, it's really funny. My first real job was in sales. And I really thought, well, I love making money. I will say I don't have a block around making money. So I was like, this is great, but really terrifying. Right. So I got in there, and I remember I talked myself into this sales job because I was like an account manager for maybe 2 months. And I just saw these salespeople, and I was like, I know I'm meant to be in there, but that is so scary. But like my desire to make money was more than my fear of failing. But I will say that first year, I mean, I was sweating buckets. I was just like practicing in the bathroom mirror. I like was so intimidated, but somehow I made it through, and I actually did a great job. So and then as I worked in for 15 years, I got really, really burned out. And I quit, and I knew I wanted to start my own company because I've always had this entrepreneurial desire. And I was convinced that I wanted nothing to do with selling. I was like, selling is what I do for money. It's not what I love. And it was really interesting through the process of working with a coach and kind of doing a lot of self-reflection. I realized I actually did love selling, and that I love to do. And it was just that environment was not right for me anymore. And so I thought like, and then I went to a coaching conference, and I saw all of these amazing coaches who were not making any money. And I was like, this is a travesty. Like, these people are incredible. Like, why are they not making money? This is not okay. And then I thought like, well, I can help them. So I kind of had this idea. I was like, I have no idea if this is actually like a legit business. I just started talking about it on Periscope, which was like really new at the time. No one knew me. So talk about like exposure phobia. I was like, I'm going to go on this area where nobody knows anything about me, and I'm just going to start talking and see what happens. And literally a course kind of came out of me over like 3 months. I'd have like a bunch of people listen, and they would ask me the same questions again and again. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm going to explain selling, here's how it's going to be. And so it was really just this process of kind of working with people. But I would say that the things that I'm teaching now are the same as like based on that first course that I developed when people ask me questions, because it's the same questions again and again and again. So it's from my experience, and then just from working with people, over, 20 years of, helping them sell or selling myself. And I will say, as an introvert, I did notice there were certain challenges that I had that were a little bit different than what people imagine that typical salesperson is like, which is like very chatty, always know someone's name. Sometimes, people imagine that person being very aggressive. I'm very much not that way. So yeah, it was a personal experience, and really just working with people and also doing a lot of personal work myself. So I guess that's like the culmination.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things I say is, if you want to accelerate your personal development, then start to put yourself online, and
oh yeah, start a business, have a baby. Those two things.
Yeah, but put yourself online, start a business, have a baby. I didn't have that baby on the list, but I guess fatherhood for me has been the same. But yeah, it's like accelerated personal development.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because I think people have an aversion to marketing, but if they have an aversion to marketing, they have like a massive repulsion to selling. So if they don't like marketing, then like selling is even like 10x that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because it's in like the collective consciousness of the greedy, pushy salesperson. So how do you get somebody to shift their even view around the role of selling so that it's something that's maybe sacred versus like something they should avoid.
Exactly. It is something sacred, right? The ability to make money. And I always ask people, like, and I wrote about this a little bit in the intro to my book, but I talk about like, why is there that collective that people have so much shame? I'm like, who is that serving? And it's really interesting when you think about it, like, you know, it's like all these systems and that we've had in place through our lifetimes, right? It's like the same people making money again and again. And it's really interesting seeing what's happening in society with everything now, that like what I'm seeing is things are becoming decentralized, right? Power is becoming decentralized, whether it's through cryptocurrency or like things that are changing in our governments or social media and access to information, right? Not to get like too crazy high level, but I feel like that's shifting the power from, you know, small groups of people and governments to the collective. Now we all have more power. And when you think about it, money is your ability to make choices. That's why I always loved making money, because for me, growing up, I didn't have a lot of money. And I was like, if I can make more money, I'm going to have more choices. And especially as a female and a woman of color, I'm like, that is really important to me. So I don't care how scary it is to sell. I want to make money so I can make more choices for myself. And so I think, you know, that is a good point. Like people are terrified. But if we think about like why, it's just because that's like the system that has been in place for so long, right? If we can take that power back and say we all have the ability to make money, it is incredibly empowering. Like part of my just personality is I love like immediate gratification. And I think that's part of why I loved selling, because I was like, I sell something, I make money, I see something on my computer, I look at my bank account and I see evidence that I did something that was like very powerful. And I'm like, and I have more money. So for me, that is part of my love of selling, that it's not even the money part. I was like, I have a physical representation of something I did. But I know for other people, like there's even shame just around having money. So, you know, we do talk about that quite a lot in the work that I do, because people have shame around having money and what that means. So, you know, and that's why people are so scared of selling, right? It's not just selling. It's like, well, what if I did make all of this money? Who would I be? And am I okay with that? And I really believe everyone should be, but you know, I can only reveal so much and have people look at that.
You talked a little bit about introverts in there, and I was actually going through our best email subject lines the other day. And the top one, I think for the whole year, was marketing for introverts. So people really loved that. And we talk about it a lot because we both identify as introverted people. And so I'm just curious, if you do work with a lot of introverts, what are the first things you do with them to help them get over all these blocks that we're talking about?
Yeah, great question. Because I am definitely an introvert too. And when I first started my business, it was like sales for women, and then changed my, like, because I was always thinking, well, maybe that was my biggest challenge when I worked in like a corporate environment. And I realized it wasn't. My biggest challenge was being an introvert, because all of these other people would like wine and dine, these huge groups of people. And I was just like, oh my God, like, I really don't want to do that. It just sounded so unpleasant to me. And so I was really lucky. I had a lot of managers who were like, okay, well, you can do your own thing. And I would just like bring one person out to dinner and like spend a lot of time and get to know them. And that ended up being really successful. Like I was able to sell a different way. So part of it is kind of showing people, hey, you don't have to sell in the way that you think is the way you're supposed to sell, right? And so what I hear most commonly from people, the feedback that I get is, oh, you just told me I don't have to do it that way. Like that alone was so powerful. So I do show people, hey, I made a lot of money. Let me show you. I can even show you screenshots of like all of the courses or different, you know, things I've sold, but more importantly, like you just don't have to do it that way. And then, you know, introverts actually have incredible superpowers for sales. And I wrote an article that was very controversial, but was extremely popular on LinkedIn called Why Introverts Are the Best Salespeople. And it was funny. I write a lot. Well, I don't write a lot of articles anymore, to be honest, but that one, it was like, you know, 10 views on my other articles. And this article probably now has like 300,000 people who viewed it and like 50,000 comments or something. And it was so interesting because it was, I would say 99% of those comments were validating. Like, yes, I run a sales team and my best salespeople are introverts, or yes, I'm an introvert and I do this again and again. Maybe one or two people were very threatened by it. And, you know, we had this interesting exchange, and it's still on LinkedIn, but it's interesting. Like you hear again, and I did all of this research. I talked to tons of sales managers, and I even asked them, like, what do you think? Do you have an introvert people? And again, I heard yes, 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 and this is why they are so great. One of the great things and superpowers of an introvert is that you make deep connections. And that's why I really have that soulful connection piece as part of the quiet selling method, because introverts are known to make deep, deep connection, right? I always say, if you were at a networking event, an extrovert would know everyone's name, but they wouldn't know anything about them. But an introvert might get to know two people, but they would know, like, they would have a really deep connection and stay in touch, which is the difference. And like, who do you think is going to like make the sale first, right? I would say the introvert, but that's my opinion.
Well, that's good news for all the introverts out there in the world,
Yeah.
in our community. So I think that a lot of times we have these perceptions that things are this way because of the media or some movie we watched, or, it's like wired into us from a young age. And often it's kind of like your 5 phobias. It's like there's all these, if you can uncover the hidden belief and realize that there might be some truth in it, but also there might be a completely different way, and that can just completely unlock you. And then that sets you free then you have choice. You can choose whether you want to go forward and make the sale or not. I know your work continues to evolve, and it's been really fun to watch you grow and expand your company and everything you're doing. And I know you're doing some new things in the corporate world that's kind of bringing more meditation and other aspects into there. Do you want to share a little bit more about that too? I think that might be interesting.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, one of the, I talked about how I got here, and Kylie, thank you for that question, because for me, like, doing that self-reflection has been so important. And I've been a really active meditator. I will say the way I meditate is very different than a lot of other people. I tried traditional meditation for so long and it didn't work for me, but I learned the style of active meditation, where you're kind of like running energy through your body. I won't go too much into detail. And then you kind of look at these different blocks and issues that come up in your life and where they come from. If they come from your parents or society, or, they come from some organizations, right, that you are a part of. And I really noticed how powerful and simple this was. So what, it, like, no question, this has been life-changing for me, right? It's like the deepest work that I've ever done, but also the simplest. So I really do this a lot with my groups and the quiet selling method. But I also saw, like, as someone who previously worked in the corporate world, I saw how important this was. So what we're doing is we're bringing this kind of meditation style and a few other really basic things into bigger companies, and selling it as a subscription to employees. Because I know, and really the goal is just to get in touch with your own kind of intuition, which I always say, especially for salespeople, right? If you think old school selling, people were like talking about following their, right? That is your intuition, right? And that is very, very valid. And there's all of these, studies and science around meditation and intuition and your subconscious that validate this. But the goal is really to teach people really, really basic meditation style so they can get in touch with their gut feelings and be able to validate that and make better decisions, be more productive, right? Be more focused, because that is a really important thing. And just to be happier in general, right? I know when I worked in the corporate world, I was so overwhelmed and overworked that I didn't really even have time to look internally. And now, just through like learning these really basic meditation tools, and that's what I kind of call them, they're really just tools that you can use. I feel like if I were to go back and work at that in that environment, it would be completely different. Just being able to feel like, hey, I own my own space and my situation, and I have control over things. Like it's just a real game changer. So that it's been really important to me to bring that to other people because it's so simple. So that's one of the things that we're doing.
I love that. How receptive are these companies to this idea, like on the front end when you first start communicating with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So it's funny because I have I have a business partner and some other people who work with me, and they were all very, like, I remember interviewing some of them and they were like, are you sure companies are ready for this? And I will tell you that they are 100%. And I'll just tell you one story. We did meditation and breathwork session for a company in Boston, and pretty conservative company. And I, to be honest, did not have high expectations of this session. I was like, okay, it's a lot of salespeople, they're international, it's like not super organized. At the end of, I would say, a 30-minute session, there were multiple people crying. There were people saying, like, I have never been able to stop my brain from like spinning until this moment. I mean, the feedback was like, I was crying just hearing the feedback, because I was like, this is so powerful. And it was like 20 minutes of breath work, right? Usually we would, because it was like an intro session for this group. I mean, it was so incredibly powerful. So we not only have they been receptive, but once they experience it, they're like, oh, wow, we definitely need to do more of this and need many people to get access to this as possible. So it's been great. I mean, there definitely are some people who are not as open to it, and that's fine. But I've been really, really pleased with how receptive companies have been.
Well, you're doing some amazing work in the world. You're kind of like it's like a spiritual warrior and a sales warrior and warrior or whatever, and getting in there and getting the words out. If people want to find out about how they can work with you or work with your company, where should they go?
Yeah, so they can go to soulfulselling.com. The meditation company specifically, if you work for a company, you want to bring it to your company, is called Collective Knowing. So those two websites are the best places to find me, or you can follow me on Instagram at Soulful Selling, because I post about both on there.
Okay, well, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom today and for giving all of our community advice. And if you want to get the show notes for this or get the links to Christine's sites, you can also go to consciousmarketer.com/podcast. And thanks everybody for listening to this special episode. Thanks, Christine, for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was great.
Yeah. And we will be with you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.